1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue.
We were here first! We were first! We were here first!
If Columbus wasn't the first, then who really discovered America?
When you pull back far enough, the story of America starts long before any European ship appears on the horizon. Maybe we're asking the wrong question. What does it mean to discover a land that was already full of people?
To understand who discovered America, we have to start with the very first people who came here. Today, even our holidays argue about this history.
They never taught us any of this when I was in school.
Det är för vissa är det. Det är sin kärn. Så är det.
Happy Columbus Day!
This series isn't about tearing down history. It's about seeing the whole story. Who was here first, who arrived later, and why we were taught only part of it.
To find out who truly discovered this land, we have to go back, far beyond 1492. Our story starts long before 1492, long before even the Vikings. For thousands of years, small bands of families moved across this frozen bridge between continents. They weren't nobodies in an empty world. They were families, carrying stories, tools, and memories into a new land. Today, we trace their path through stone tools and footprints turned to fossils. Genetic evidence now helps us see how many different paths people took into this hemisphere. These tools and fragments are the footprints they left behind, evidence of lives here thousands of years before any European flag.
When we ask who discovered America, we have to remember that these people did, simply by living here, generation after generation.
Over millennia, people spread out across this land, filling it with languages, cultures, and names. Those ancient journeys didn't vanish. Their descendants are still here today. Across the continent, entire cities rose and felt here long before any European mapmaker knew this land existed.
These weren't empty wildernesses waiting to be discovered. They were already full of cities, markets, and names.
Before Europeans arrived, this hemisphere was already home to complex societies, each with its own idea of what it meant to come from somewhere.
At contact, there were hundreds of distinct languages here, proof that this land had been discovered and rediscovered by many people.
But before we argue over which European discovered America, we have to remember, this was already a crowded, complicated world of its own.
From a European monk's point of view, the world ended in blank ocean, monsters, and rumor.
For centuries, Europeans copied the same maps and ideas, repeating an image of a world with nothing beyond the Western Sea.
To them, the ocean west of Europe wasn't just empty, it was dangerous, maybe even cursed.
European power and wealth depended on routes they already knew, across the Mediterranean and toward Asia, not on lands beyond the edge of their maps.
From this point of view,
Anything west of here looked like a discovery waiting to happen, even if millions of people were already living there.
Even the Viking stories that may describe North America survived as marginal tales, literally in the margins. By the time Columbus sailed, Europe already held layers of rumor, myth, and half-remembered journeys pointing west.
On this side, a hemisphere full of people. On this side, a map that pretends they're not there. That clash is what will drive our story from here on.
Sometimes Phyllis Marks, Albert Viking.
Columbus discovered America. That's what the history books say.
Yes.
One picture says, discovery. The other reminds us there were already worlds here when those ships arrived.
Even online, the argument never really stops. Columbus, Vikings, or the people who were always here.
We have strong evidence that Norse sailors reached North America around the year 1000.
The Norse weren't the first humans here, but they were the first Europeans we know of to leave a footprint on this shore.
You can't discover a people who already had names for every river, every mountain, every star above them.
It still says, Columbus discovered America. When are our kids gonna learn the whole story?
Maybe the real question isn't just who arrived when, but who got the power to decide what counts as discovery.
On paper, Columbus thought he had found a shortcut to Asia by sailing straight into that blank space on European maps.
Backing his voyage was a political bet, more about trade, power, and faith than about some pure quest for knowledge.
He writes about taking possession of islands where people already live, and almost casually that they have no iron weapons.
Even the map tells a story of conquest. Old names pushed aside, new names declared.
Here, we don't call it discovery. We talk about what happened to the people who were already here.
For some, taking down these statues feels like erasing history. For others, it's the first time their history is being seen at all.
For us, 1492 is not about discovery. It's the beginning of a very long story of survival.
When we say discovered, we're not just talking about who arrived where. We're talking about to Antistrums.
If anyone discovered America, it was the Vikings, not Columbus.
Or maybe discovery isn't the right word at all when indigenous nations were already here.
Columbus, I mean, that's what we learned, right?
The Vikings got here first.
The Native Americans did, they were already here.
Honestly, no one discovered it. People just arrived at different times.
Even in kids' drawings, you can see two stories colliding. One about arrival, and one about who was already home.
So, does discovery still feel like the right word after seeing this?
Every decade or so, new discoveries push the first Americans further and further into the deep past.
If you want a simple, one-word answer, you'll always end up choosing somebody's myth over someone else's reality.
Our story has at least three threads: the first peoples, the Norse voyages, and the wave that begins with Columbus and never really stops. In this series, we're going to follow those three paths: North, Atlantic, and Caribbean. To follow this story, we'll need to trace three journeys at once: across ice, across the North Atlantic, and into the Caribbean. One series, three climates, and a lot of questions we can't pack easy answers for.
Just remember, once we air this, some people will say you're rewriting history. We need to show clearly who we talked to and why.
Over the next episodes, we'll follow each of these paths, on the ground, with the people whose lives are rooted there. Each thread has its own evidence, its own experts, and its own blind spots.
We start next with the oldest layer, how the first peoples got here, and why that alone could fill a whole series.
Those are the places we'll go next, following footprints, sagas, and ships. The further we travel from the textbook version, the more complicated the real landscape becomes.
These objects don't care who we say discovered this land. They just prove people were here. What we tell them now
will shape whose stories they think matter in 100 years.
You can't discover a people who already had names for every river.
And for every generation that came before.
From up here, there is no single footprint, no first flag, just a hemisphere that many different peoples walk. Sometimes rewriting history starts with crossing out a single word.
When I was a kid, we just learned Columbus discovered America.
Yeah, that's what they told you. But there were indigenous nations here, and even the Vikings, before his ship showed up.
Changing how we file the past on shelves and syllabi in our own heads is slow work, but it's work that's already begun.
In the next episode, we'll leave these monuments behind and go as far back as we can to the people whose footsteps